I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
You have worked on a lot of horror properties.
Yeah, I'm old.
Yeah.
I'm really old.
What made this one sort of attractive to you?
Okay, my two favorite things in life are history, and so nonfiction, and horror. And Aaron Mahnke's podcast combines them both. So the fact that we can go back and examine the origin stories of the frightening and the supernatural and learn how they came to be, that there were real people who had terrible things happen to them, and bring those to life was fascinating. The opportunity to work in a brand new medium, I mean, to do that when you're 60 years old is really cool, to combine animation and recreations and documentary archival footage was simply irresistible.
It's hitting such a neat moment too. I think where there's so much true crime on television, so much horror on television. It seems like a natural fit.
You know, it's funny because we didn't think about it as true crime, but you're absolutely
First thing
right.
is true, yeah.
You're absolutely right. So that's because I come from horror. I
Yeah.
look at it as the origins of these horror stories, but you're right. They were, but in some cases, the crimes weren't perpetrated. Like, I don't know if you've seen Passing Notes yet, but, you know, those weren't actually perpetrated by one person on another. It really remains a mystery to this day.
I was looking at as you executive producing the show. One of the things that I was questioning while watching it was they're really dark. Like, they're very dark. The Bridget episode is extremely horrific, and I was
Black stockings, yes.
Yes. So, as the tales get, are you going to stick with darker tales?
Well, you know
what?
what? They're all inspired by the podcast.
Yeah. Right.
So, you know, we may have an opportunity to have Aaron before he does a podcast that started streaming. We may do something brand new. But I think it really is about the superstition and folklore and mythology generally derive from stories that frighten you. You know, it's an explanation for something that people can't explain, and you know that can be creepy without being horrifying. You know, and we have one, Echoes, which I don't know if you've seen, but that's the one where, you know, how did they treat mental illness, which is, you know, an ice pick through the eye. I'm not signing up for that one. So, you know, so they're not always, but it does deal with Bedlam. I mean, now we know the origin of the word Bedlam. It was, you know, it was a mental institution, and it was Bedlam. So I love the fact that in every case we learn something absolutely fascinating about the origins of something that, you know, that is a little creepy.
I also appreciated that two of your first episodes seemed to be about the oppression of women in history, throughout history. You know, the one with the doctor and the ice pick, and then the one about Bridget and the whole changeling thing.
And you know what? We're facing going back to that now. I mean, it's surprising to me that people think it's a good thing that the Equal Rights Amendment didn't pass. So we're really not that far ahead in terms of society's fear about women who are powerful. So you know, I think these can also serve as cautionary tales and remind people what can happen if we go backward. And the effect of the Bridget Cleary case was that the Irish people were considered so backward that they were not able to gain independence. So there are consequences that are beyond what just happened to the individual people in those families.
So all of these stories are, regardless of whether or not, we had a question about like pure evil, regardless of whether or not like where the evil falls on the spectrum, they're all human stories. Why is horror a good genre to tell human stories with?
Well, I think whenever you really want to communicate something powerful, when the consequences are so grave, as we see in these, you know, whether there's death or being banished by a community, or and they made a tonic forced to do something macabre to a dead loved one, you really do get to the bottom of the darkness that we as humans carry within our souls. I mean, you don't necessarily see evil necessarily in an animal. I mean, animals operate on instinct. But in other cases, I mean, if you look at the one about a werewolf, I mean, that's really frightening what people are capable of, and how well planned the cover-up was. It was genius. So so you clearly go back to saying there was no explanation for a serial killer back in Germany in the 1500s. So of course it had to be a werewolf.
Why do you think we like being scared? It's the scary stories that tend to continue and get repeated, and we sit around campfires and
Grimm's
like
fairy
scaring
tales.
ourselves.
Yes, I mean we tell them to our kids.
Yeah. Like, what is it about the human
I think we
condition?
live in a scary world, and I think the unknown has always been frightening, and the fact that you're able to tell these stories, especially in an anthology, and in our case, explain them and give them context. You're able to experience them and the catharsis without having yourself in jeopardy, and I think it's like going on a roller coaster. You get that adrenaline, you get that rush, and then it's over and you can get off it, and go about your daily lives. But there's a huge rush.
We seem to have an obsession with the macabre and staring into that dark abyss.
And this is, as I said, I mean, it's even more frightening because these stories really happen.
I wanted to ask about the animation that you used during the title sequences for the show.
Well, it's throughout. It's not just in the title sequences. There's animation throughout the episodes.
And was that something that you set out to do
Yes,
from the beginning?
it's in the script. Glenn Morgan in his writer's room wrote the entire episode and scripted what was going to be covered in the animation, what was going to be covered in the archival. Obviously, it's a process, and there are times in post-production we realized we needed a little more. We needed a bridge or a transition or footage that we thought we'd be able to find in archives we couldn't, so we needed a new approach to that. But Mark Minucci and John Halpern, the reality producers, the documentary producers, sourced animators throughout the world.
Sorry.
Is more of a business, but with the mixed media, did Amazon seem like a good fit for that? Because I know they've been doing lots of more experimental media shows.
Yes, and in fact they embraced the fact that this was not something that fit within a box of either scripted or unscripted, the fact that it was a hybrid. And, huge kudos to them, because doing something new is difficult. It's when you're dealing with networks, it's much easier to be a follower than an innovator, and they're staking the success of Amazon going forward and being innovators.
I am actually curious, how big does archive play a role throughout?
I mean, it's critically important. Obviously, in Beast Within, which is the werewolf one, it's harder to find that kind of footage. It's no one had cameras then, and they weren't taking video, so the
Unless you're a time
animation-
traveler, and that's not what this is. This is not sci-fi.
So each episode really had a different focus in terms of the archival material and what was available. I mean, I love the one in Passing Notes where you go back and we hear Arthur Conan Doyle reportedly speaking from the beyond.
Go ahead.
I was say, with the podcast becoming the TV show and now becoming the book, do you have insight, or do you let Aaron kind of go off on his own? Do you have any insight into the podcast or the books?
No, Aaron is a creator in every sense of the word. And we're just lucky that he gave us the template from which we could adapt the podcast. Every now and again he'll drop a little hint as to a story he's telling in the future. And there were times when we were putting these 6 episodes together that he said, "Can you just hold off on that aspect because I'm exploring it as the A story in a future podcast." So he was very involved.
Do you feel like there is a particular episode that will resonate
I
with
think
people
that,
well?
I think that everyone has different interests. I think that that's what's great about it is that, some people are absolutely fascinated by vampires. So I think, they made a tonic will resonate with them. And other people, are interested in, in what backstories were for women in other times and how they were treated. So I think, Black Stockings will certainly resonate with them. How barbaric medicine is, that is an element of They Made It Tonic as well as Echo. So I think there's a little bit something for everyone. And I personally love, the paranormal. I love the idea of what is beyond.
Yeah.
And, is there another world? What happens after we die? So passing notes will really resonate with them.
What do you think? You've talked a little bit about how the structure of this is different. We've talked about how it's true crime and also horror. What else about this anthology do you think will set it apart from the other anthologies that are sort of out there?
I think the fact that it is nonfiction, the fact that it's a mixed media approach, it isn't just scripted, it isn't just interviews and talking heads. Most of the true crime stories that you see are a lot of talking heads, people being interviewed. You go into the crime labs and you hear friends of the victims talking about it. None of that is in this, so it really is brand new.
What would you like to do with a second season? What would you like to explore more of?
Now that we understand how to do it, because a lot of this season was figuring, okay, we think we know what we want to do, but how do we do it? We'll have an opportunity to, we really actually know what types of stories work best. We can go into Erin's ever-growing archive now and figure out which stories work best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.